Guys, welcome to the channel. Welcome to the... Where's my truck? Oh, I have a very interesting loaner car. I forgot my truck's still at the dealer getting detailed, where they're gonna take off all the wheels, get it cleaned up, and take care of some little things. They sent me home with this. Anyway, now we cleared up that small truck snafu. I'm gonna go and check on it right now. God, this thing is so small compared to my truck. I'm looking at the screen on the camera and think, look at how much bigger I look in this thing than you guys usually see me in the Ram. Anyway, I'm gonna go check on the truck right now, and then I'm gonna go over the entire suspension system, because the suspension system is finally complete, and we're gonna go over everything. We have a lot to do in the vlog today. We have a lot going on, so stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and be beautiful. It's like Dodge Squad today. There's a 1500 next to, I guess they haven't started on it yet. So there's the old Ram. There's the old Ram, still looking dirty. So I guess they haven't. Oh my goodness. Look at this thing. Your boy. You're making me want to do a dually build. Your boy right here. He's got it going on. Put these ideas about a dually build in mind. So the topic of today's video is obviously, how do you level or lift your truck using quality parts, not affecting your ride quality tremendously, and obviously remaining safe. Now, so I know there can be a lot of uncertainty out there when leveling your truck or lifting your truck. No matter what you want to do, there's a lot of options out there. There's a ton of different price points, and then each store you go to, obviously the sales guys are gonna tell you a different story based on either what they offer or what they want to sell you. So what I'm gonna tell you is unbiasedly, I've had 6 or 7 trucks now, leveled and lifted, all of them except one that I already bought lifted, and I've made the mistakes. I've tried to do it the cheap way, and it's blew up in my face. So what I want to do is explain a couple options that you have to level your truck, the pros and cons of each, and kind of where you can find a middle ground without spending $6,000, but still having something that looks good and functions correctly, which is obviously the most important part. So when leveling your truck, there's a couple things you can do. There's a poly spacer you can buy, and they range from about 1 inch up to 2.5 to 3 inches, depending on the brand. They're the low end of the scale. So what they do is they remove your coil, they put the spacer in between the coil and the frame, and it lifts the nose of the truck up. Literally is what it is. You still use all the factory parts, everything is the same. They literally are just putting a block of plastic or steel or aluminum, no matter what material you'll buy, and it lifts the front. Literally just levels, which it does what it says, but they range from about $60 up to $150 depending on what brand you go with, but it's literally the entry-level, most rudimentary way to level your truck, and the most unsafe. So basically, when let's get something I can use. So say this is your truck, right? And this is the hood, so your nose is down. When you level your truck, the axle, so imagine this is your front wheels, right? So here you are factory. When you level it, the axle will actually come back. And on a small lift, an inch or two, even 2.5 inches, that's not a tremendously big deal. But when you get up into a 3+ inch level, that's when it becomes a hassle, and when you need to take other steps to ensure that the geometry of your suspension is correct, so that one, your truck rides better, it's not unsafe to drive, and ultimately, you know, you're not wearing stuff out after 10-15,000 miles. I put a leveling spacer on my first truck, hated it. Put a a leveling spacer for my second truck, hated it. Basically, it's a horrible ride. It's the shocks aren't long enough, so it tops the shocks out whenever you go over bumps. It's crap, okay? If you if you do anything, please spend a little bit more money on a better kit, which the next step up from that is obviously going to be a leveling coil. And what a leveling coil is it's the same principle, but instead of just putting a piece of metal on top of your factory coil springs, they are designed to be longer. So obviously my truck has a Carley 2.5-inch leveling coil. Obviously it's 2.5 inches longer than the factory one, but they take out that crappy factory coil and they replace it with a higher quality linear rate coil spring, which levels the truck. So anyway, you pick one of those two. If you go with the spacer or the coil, I suggest the coil highly. It's the much better way to do it, but either way, whichever one you choose, you're now, say, 2 to 2.5 inches higher in the front. Well, now what you have to consider is ride quality and handling. So for me, I purchased Bilstein 5100 shocks that are 2.5 inches longer than the factory size, obviously to match the 2.5 inches longer coils. Now what those do is they act just as a shock should, except instead of using a spacer to use the factory shock with a chunk of metal on the top of it, they are designed to be longer and obviously operate correctly with this system. The third thing is I then got the Carley adjustable track bar. What a track bar is it basically centers your front axle on the truck. So when you level the front of the truck, your axle actually slides slightly to the driver's side, on my truck at least. So what that adjustable track bar does is it takes the passenger wheel and they are able to adjust the length of it, and it kicks that passenger wheel back out to where it's supposed to be, so your truck is actually straight and not kind of crooked a little bit. This is obviously going to help you not eat through tires immediately. It's going to help you have better alignment. It's going to help you have better ride quality. Also, the cast track bar that comes from the factory on all trucks is kind of crappy, and I would either go with Carley suspension components or Thurin fabrication are my two favorite for all suspension components. I wouldn't recommend really anything else but those two. And again, what they do is they use a much better Cromley component, much better bushings on the end of the track bar rather than the Dodge vulcanized bushings that come from the factory that are kind of crappy. And again, makes the ride better, makes it more smooth, and again corrects that geometry. After you've made the modification to lift the front, you have to fix that geometry. The number one mistake in leveling or lifting a truck is people get that $60 spacer, lift it or level it, and that's it, boom, I'm done. And then get upset when their truck is ruined after 12,000 miles, or after their wheel bearings are out, or after their tie rod ends are out, or after their tires are getting torn apart in no miles. So I know it's more money up front, but the reduced wear and tear that it's going to be putting on your truck by doing the things the correct way is worth its weight in gold. After that, I actually got the Carley sway bar. Now, a sway bar isn't essential for geometry or drivability, but what it does is at least on the Dodge, the factory sway bar is set to a very high torsion rate, meaning it's very stiff. And what the sway bar does is it's kind of like opposite dog ears. As one wheel goes up, it'll push this other wheel down just like this, so that you don't lose connection with the road on the other wheel. If you hit a bump, if you go in a pothole and this wheel starts to jump, like if you go in a pothole and this wheel jumps, it'll push this other wheel down to keep you connected with the road, which is obviously very important. So what the Carley one does, and the Thurin one also does, is it uses a progressive rate. So at a slow speed or a low speed, it'll be more articulate, and then at a higher speed, so if you're going on the highway and you come across a corner, it'll tighten up so it reduces your body roll. So it's $700 for the Carley one, and there's a video on it right here, but I think it's highly worth it. It does change the way your truck handles. It's not sloppy, it's not soft. It's definitely not like a pre-runner, but it's not the like rigid semi-truck horrible riding feeling that the factory sway bar gives you. Again, it's not essential, but that does improve your ride quality drastically, I think. Okay, after that, what I got was the Icon steering brace, and the thing about a steering brace is when you put these wider wheels on, it obviously puts a lot of strain on the steering box, and what is commonly known as a death wobble can occur down the line. So what a steering brace does is it just bolts up to your frame, and it actually connects to the bottom of the sway bar, and then it gives you a greasable hub that kind of attaches to the bottom of the steering box that just kind of holds it all together nicely. Doesn't let it play as much, doesn't let it sway, and it does help. It's also greasable, so like I said, you can grease it and it keeps it extends the life of everything. The moral of the story is you want to extend the life of everything. And the last component I got so far on this truck, for the front end at least, was a Moog half-degree offset ball joint on the passenger side. So depending on what tires you get, some tires have a left pull, some tires have a right pull, depending on the manufacturer. And if your alignment shop cannot get the alignment perfect and you're very picky like me, what you can do is get an offset ball joint, which basically, imagine this is your ball joint, and in the middle, let me get a pen, in the middle is where the bolt usually goes. It'll just be slightly off. You know, that's drastic, but it would just be slightly off so that the center is different and they can get your alignment dead center. A lot of misconceptions about lifted and leveled trucks is obviously they ride like crap, which they can if you don't do it right. I like the way mine rides. The only other component that I haven't upgraded is the radius arms. If you don't have radius arms, you have independent front suspension, which means you'd have upper and lower control arms. And you can tell is if you look in your wheel well, and there's kind of a U-shaped bracket on the top of your suspension, that means those are upper and lower control arms. Radius arms are the bars that go beneath the truck that you see that attach to the axle. The only other thing I could get to upgrade the suspension and the ride in this truck would be radius arms, higher quality radius arms, which I still may do down the road. They're $1,500 though, and they don't make a tremendous difference other than obviously being much stronger, improving the ride quality a little bit, and then putting that factory geometry right back to where you want it to be. The final way to obviously lift your truck is doing a full suspension lift. Now there's two ways you can do that. There's either a body lift or a suspension lift, or a combination of both. A suspension lift essentially uses a combination of parts to lift the suspension, both the front and the back. And then a body lift obviously raises the body up off of the chassis slightly, depending on how big you choose. Again, I never go to that extreme because I like to keep my truck's drivability. I always just do a level because I already am about a hair away from fitting in my garage anyway, and I like to be able to get into the garage if I need to. But again, they use a similar component. There's much more that goes into a suspension lift, but the principle is still the same. So no matter which method you choose, I would go with the best you can afford. And if you have to save up a little longer and hold off, I would highly recommend you don't get the polycarbonate or any kind of just leveling puck and leave it at that, because there's so much more that needs to go into the suspension. There's so much more thought that needs to go into it, and companies again like Carley and Thurin spend so much time, so much money on research and development that to make sure that all their components fit and all their components are very deliberate and intentional, rather than just putting out a whimsical spacer that may or may not work. It's worth its weight. You're spending between probably $40,000 and $70,000 on a truck, depending on what you have, and to spend $60 to level it is just ludicrous. You could realistically level your truck with good high quality components for about $800, and that's not a tremendous amount of money when you compare it to what the truck costs. So save up a little bit, guys, please, because you're not going to be happy with those eBay spacers, I promise you. Dang, that thing is absolutely crazy. The vlog with this, I've actually had these LED lights for the truck in my garage for like 7 months, so I'm gonna throw them on finally. You ready for the sweet transition? Whew, that is a little cleaner. Not a big deal, but just something to make it a little cleaner. That is gonna do it for the vlog. Here's the interior. Guys, if you haven't already, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and comment below. We'll see you next video.
Oye, te hablo de